Somewhere in ancient India, a physician hands his patient a cup, the patient drinks it, and by every measure we have, the physician was right to do it. Not because the liquid was medicine in the way we understand medicine, but because buried inside something that looks absurd to us today was a signal, a real one, that pointed directly at what was killing the patient. The question isn't whether ancient people were wrong to drink urine, the question is what they actually discovered, and what modern science quietly confirmed centuries later. Across thousands of years and dozens of civilizations, doctors prescribed the same thing. Ancient Egyptians, Greeks, Romans, and cultures from the Middle Ages through the Renaissance all recorded the therapeutic use of urine, and not fringe healers, physicians considered educated and respected in their time. The ancient Indians called it Shivambu, water of Shiva. The Romans called urine the gold of the blood and the elixir of long life. Pliny the Elder, one of Rome's most celebrated naturalists, recommended urine for burns, skin disease, scorpion stings, and even infant rash. This wasn't a fringe belief, this was the medical establishment. But here's the first thing you have to understand. Most of them weren't drinking it because they thought it was waste. They were drinking it because they thought it was not waste. Ancient physicians largely did not consider urine a waste product at all. They saw it as a distilled essence, something the blood had selected, refined, and released. That logic sounds wrong to us now, but follow it for a moment. Because the people who built that theory were looking at something real. Before any of them drank it, they studied it. And here is where the story gets genuinely remarkable. The practice of uroscopy, the medical examination of urine, can be traced all the way back to ancient Greece and Rome. By the Middle Ages, it had become the central diagnostic tool of Western medicine, to Sumerian and Babylonian medicine 4,000 years ago. Ancient physicians examined urine obsessively. They looked at its color, its clarity, its smell, its foam, its sediment. Medieval doctors developed a urine wheel, a chart divided into 20 segments, each corresponding to a different color of urine and a different suspected illness. And then, some of them tasted it. This is the part modern audiences can't get past. But before you dismiss it, consider what they actually found. By around 600 BCE, Indian physicians made a remarkable observation. Ants were attracted to the urine of certain patients. They weren't imagining it. They were observing something chemically real. Indian physicians called this condition madhumeha, honey urine. If ants rushed to a patient's urine, the diagnosis was made. Today we call that condition diabetes. Sanskrit texts from this period describe the full syndrome: extreme thirst, excessive urination, foul breath, and sweet-tasting urine, in enough detail that physicians could distinguish between what we now call type 1 and type 2 diabetes. Think about that. Without a laboratory, without a microscope, without any understanding of glucose or the pancreas, they correctly identified a metabolic disease, subclassified it into 2 types, and developed a reliable biological test for it. The test was ants. In 1674, more than 2,000 years later, English physician Thomas Willis described diabetic urine as wonderfully sweet, as if imbued with honey or sugar, and received significant credit for the discovery. The Indian physicians had beaten him by over 2 millennia. The urine wasn't the medicine here, the urine was the data, and ancient physicians were reading it with remarkable precision. But they didn't stop at diagnosis, they kept going. And this is where the history gets genuinely complicated, because some of what they prescribed, applying urine to wounds, using it topically on burns and skin conditions, was actually, in at least one specific way, doing something real, not for the reasons they believed, but real nonetheless. Urine contains urea. Urine is roughly 95% water. The primary solid component is urea, the main end product of protein metabolism. And urea, it turns out, is not inert. Modern dermatology has confirmed that urea improves skin barrier function, enhances antimicrobial defense by regulating gene expression, and plays a role in controlling keratinocyte proliferation. As far back as 1917, researchers confirmed the antibacterial properties of urea, demonstrating that bacteria suspended in urea solutions lose their deoxidizing power, and suggested its use in wound care. One of the first uses of urea in modern medicine was exactly this, the topical treatment of wounds, because of its antibacterial and proteolytic properties. Today, urea is a standard ingredient in dermatological creams. It's prescribed for eczema, psoriasis, dry skin, and wound debridement. It's in your pharmacy right now, probably in a product labeled something clinical and clean. The ancient Romans who told their soldiers to clean wounds with urine, they were getting a dilute urea wash with real antimicrobial activity. They didn't know why it worked, but the observation that it sometimes did, that wasn't superstition, that was empiricism. But this is where we have to be honest, because the history of urine therapy is also a history of people taking one real signal and wildly overextending it. Urine therapy, as a systematic practice, was formalized in the modern sense by a British naturopath named John Armstrong in the early 20th century, not by ancient physicians. The ancient texts that practitioners cite as evidence, the Dhamma Tantra, the Shivambu Kalpa, are not as well attested as they're presented. According to medical anthropologist Joseph Alter, many modern urine therapy practices are closer to Armstrong's 1944 book than to actual ancient Ayurvedic medicine. The mythology around ancient urine drinking runs far ahead of the evidence, and the science on drinking urine is unambiguous. No peer-reviewed clinical trial has ever demonstrated that consuming urine treats any disease or condition. Modern data has also refuted the widespread myth that urine is sterile. Even in healthy people, persistent microbial communities exist in the urinary tract. Drinking urine reintroduces urea, creatinine, concentrated waste products, and potential contaminants back into the body, substances the kidneys specifically filtered out. In a survival situation with no water, perhaps. In a medical context, no. The ancient physicians weren't wrong because they were stupid. They were wrong because they extended good observations into a framework that didn't hold. They saw that urine reflected the body's internal state, that it contained real chemical signals, that certain applications had real effects, and then concluded that the substance itself must be broadly powerful. That leap, from real signal to grand theory, is one of the most common errors in the history of medicine. And yet, they weren't entirely wrong either. Here is what ancient physicians actually built. Across 4,000 years of staring at urine, they built the predecessor to modern diagnostics. Modern urinalysis, the standard laboratory examination of urine used in hospitals every single day, developed directly from uroscopy. The logic is the same. The urine contains information about what's happening inside the body. Read it carefully enough, and it tells you what's wrong. The urine of King George III was later analyzed and found to be purple, a sign of porphyria, a nervous system disorder that may explain the king's infamous madness. His physicians examined it at the time. They just didn't know what to conclude. Today, a urine test can detect kidney disease, diabetes, liver failure, certain cancers, and dozens of infections, often before a patient feels a single symptom. The ancient physicians were doing something genuinely sophisticated. They were building a diagnostic system from observation alone, in an era without chemistry, without microscopy, without germ theory. Some of what they prescribed was wrong, some was harmless, and some, the topical applications, the diagnostic logic, the careful correlation between urine characteristics and specific diseases, was quietly, undeniably accurate. They didn't know about urea's chemistry, they didn't know about glucose, they didn't know about bacteria, but they knew how to look. And in a world without instruments, looking carefully at what the body produced was the closest thing to science anyone had. The real story of ancient urine medicine isn't a story of ignorance, it's a story of observation without explanation, signal without theory, a discovery that took 2,000 years to understand, and another few centuries to put in a cream you can buy at a pharmacy. They were wrong about almost everything, and they were onto something real.